I am resolved to enter the kingdom, leaving the paths of sin. Friends may oppose me, foes may set me, still will I enter in. I will hasten to sense of glad and free. Jesus, greatest, highest, I will come to thee.
Amen. Thank you, guys. Yesterday I had a video playing up here of Teresa leading her choir at the jail. This is something that absolutely just took off by storm. God's Grace Women's Choir. My little church that I pastor donated choir rows for them, and absolutely incredible stuff. Teresa is actually the music director for Tabernacle United Methodist Church in Binghamton, big high steeple church. And she's got quite the resume. If you are interested in learning how to start something like this, talk to her. Maybe during the break, I'll play the video. She was featured on the ABC News in Binghamton. Also, she was featured in the annual conference of the United Methodist Church just recently. I thought their production of the video was even better, so that's what I had playing yesterday. The other program we have at our jail, if you're interested in emulating it, my son Wesley is here. He's actually the librarian for Sister Donald's Library. Wesley is a certified New York State librarian and master's in library science. And he also has a degree in TV broadcasting and in English. If you want to talk to him, he's very big on advocacy. He teaches three creative writing classes in my facility. He's here. And by the way, I don't know, Teresa, you want to mention?
Well, this little bird flew over and told me that Saturday is Wes's birthday. So I wonder if we could sing to him.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to sweet. Happy birthday to. Wesley's also written about 6 books, YA books, and we actually have them in our jail library, and they're just so hot. They're incredible. I have to put on reserve in the library. Before we get into the next session, it's gonna be a pretty good session. I have to give 5 minutes here to Father Chuck. He's got an announcement for us, okay?
I know I'm probably being redundant, but sometimes it's okay to preach to the choir, as they say. I always need to remind myself that over 50% of the New Testament was written in prison. And Chris asked me to say a few words, and I started thinking back to my time at all the facilities. And one of the things that one of the guys shared with me that was one of the more profound things that touched my heart was, I said to this dear brother who's Chinese, and I knew that he was going to get deported, and after he finished his jail time, and I said, gee, that's really horrible that you're getting deported to China. He says, Chaplain, this is wonderful. I'm going to be a missionary to China. And so the point is that God uses us in ways we never would have asked or imagined. And I'm always reminded there's a piece of scripture that helps to center me in my walk. And those are the words where Jesus came out of the wilderness. And the first place he went was his hometown synagogue in Nazareth. And he pulls out the book of Isaiah and starts reading the passage that essentially explains what's known as the Jubilee year. And he says things like, you know, the captives shall be released, slaves shall be released, debts will be given, the blind shall see, and the lame shall walk, and so on. And he says, on today, this is fulfilled in your hearing. And essentially what he's saying is, I'm proclaiming not a Jubilee year, but a Jubilee era. That from now forward, we are about the business of manifesting God's kingdom, and this is what it looks like. And guess what? Everybody was thrilled to hear that. They were overjoyed. But then Jesus goes on to say, by the way, there was this guy Naaman who was healed by Elijah, and then there was this widow woman from Zarephath who was delivered from starvation. And guess what? They were foreigners. They were the other. And all of a sudden, they wanted to lynch Jesus. My point in sharing that is that the inmates are the other. The inmates, as I said yesterday, are Jesus. You know, yesterday I quoted that scripture. Jesus said, you know, when I was in prison, did you visit me? And the people that were hearing him said, oh, you haven't been to prison. Well, we know that Jesus actually did go to prison. And so it's a privilege. It's a privilege to be a part of a church. I sometimes call it the incarcerated church, and some people got upset with me about that, but there's no shame in being a prisoner. And so therefore, it's a privilege to be a part of that church and to be a conduit to bringing the gospel there. However, as I said yesterday, it grieves me tremendously that that there are probably the highest number of vacancies in the Protestant chaplain items in all my time associated with chaplaincy. You know, what do they say? The blood is on us. And our speaker yesterday said probably the most profound thing I ever heard. He said, guilt is okay. And it's okay to feel that, because that, I pray, will inspire us and encourage us to step out and share the need, tell our friends, tell the churches, tell our denominations, tell our bishops, tell everybody that we about the need, and I believe God will provide the follow through, as they say. And so I can't encourage you enough to encourage people to go to the website, talk to Jim Ketchum. Jim is wonderful because he's a resource. He can explain, he'll hold your hand to get all the documents that you need. And if you don't have the document that you think you need, Jim will show you a way to find an alternative document. So I can't, so please, you know, it's what somebody said to me once, the church is one generation from extinction. And we are the conduits to not only manifesting God's kingdom, but strengthening and building up the body of Christ that exists in the prisons of New York State. Amen.
Hallelujah. We have two speakers coming up. We have, oh, no, wrong page here.
So do Rosemary and Eric.
Are they here? I don't know, are they here?
Don't see either of them right now.
Oh, no, okay. Wow.
They are here in the hotel.
Next one is, okay.
So,
I've got one little piece, I'm gonna just kind of, Reverend Mayfield, will you be our acting secretary to sign some certificates for us? Are we good with that? Everybody okay with that? Is there a second for that? I made a motion here. Is there a second for the
Well-
motion?
oh, are you gonna have Murray sign your name as president?
No, is there a vice chair for secretary too?
No.
No, I'll sign my, oh, no, okay, I'm sorry. I'll sign my name. It's okay. Okay.
Just,
Like,
I mean, unless Murray wants to.
no, I thought there was, I thought the secretary to sign that too, because, Mike isn't here with us. Okay, well, we've got, a session here, we have, put this back up again.
They're here now.
Up there, yep. We have the, where is this?
Let's,
Okay.
so maybe Jim, or were you gonna make that introduction, or?
Yeah,
You want-
Yeah, Jim, why don't you make that introduction? Yeah, there's not a whole lot here on my piece of paper here.
Yeah,
Well, I know Eric is.
but before we do that, can I get the HDMI to plug in here?
I can go on one here.
It's bad.
Gonna need this one. Yep. Ah, man, it's like an anaconda here.
Yeah, I rolled it up too neatly.
Well, this is, I rolled it up again, and you said it again.
Yeah.
Have to reset this again. Hey, hello, sir.
And then, we need to, hey,
Hey, good to see you.
Eric, good to see you, man.
Thanks
Thank you for having us. Good, Rosemary. So just gonna get this on the screen and, there we go. Good. Let me just say one preparatory, and then I'll let you do the formal.
Come on, use the mic,
introduction.
please.
I'm gonna let our chaplain coordinator, Jim, do the formal introductions. But I did want to say that we're really pleased to have the former Attorney General with us, Eric Schneiderman, and also Rosemary Rivera, who is with Citizen Action, formerly the co-executive director of Citizen Action, and they've been working a lot on the question of conditions in the prison, including addressing violence. The one thing I will say is that we are fortunate today to have Jimmy Vilkine here, who is with WNYC and the Gothamist. So he is going to report on this session. And I know that we want people to speak freely, but I particularly want to say to prison chaplains, we know that you have certain restrictions. So if if you speak but maybe not use your name, or if Jimmy wants to interview you, probably be for background, but we want people to be open to talk about what we're talking about here today. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Jim.
Well, Peter, thank you for completing the introductions for me.
I thought you could riff longer. I just,
All right, we are very glad to have Eric Schneiderman and Rosemary Rivera with us today. I think you'll be very interested in hearing what they've been working on in terms of responding to prison violence and responding to the latest omnibus criminal justice bill that is now on the governor's desk, that was passed by a large margin in the last session. The governor must sign it by the end of December in order for it to go into law. And that involves primarily, the really important part of that is expanding the size of the Commission on Corrections, which currently has only 3 members, and they're all appointed by the governor. I have been monitoring their work this year. Through the first 4 months of the year, their public sessions where anyone's allowed to come and listen and speak totaled in 4 months 15 minutes. And then they go into executive session. And they have never made a pronouncement regarding the guards' strike, regarding the deaths in prison at the hands of corrections officers, ever. Nothing. We want to expand that group to be 9 people from different backgrounds, including possibly people who were formerly incarcerated, people with a social work or psychology background, perhaps family members of the incarcerated, and have them be able to speak and speak regularly about conditions in the jails and the prisons. So, and there's more news coming. I'll leave that up to Rosemary and Eric. I hope you'll welcome them.
is that on?
You have to
It
speak
is.
right into it, though.
Yeah.
Turn up a little bit, maybe. I'm not sure. Where the master is. Yeah, it's pretty much talk right into that thing.
Yep.
It's
Don't
very
be afraid of-
directional.
Hi, everybody. Do I need the mic?
Yeah.
I do need the mic. Okay,
Careful
interesting.
with this cord.
Got it. Okay, so I need the mic. Hi, everyone. My name is Rosemary Rivera. Yes, I was the former executive director of Citizen Action of New York. I'm now their senior advisor. But I had a very interesting trajectory and perhaps a very non-traditional way of coming into that position after many years. And so in order to ground us a little bit about our new campaign, the End Prison Violence, which the New York State Council of Churches is part of our core group, and for reasons that I think are really important, and we'll talk about that. I thought that I would ground us a little bit in a little bit of my story. I am also a formerly incarcerated woman. I did about 8 years total, or maybe even more, in prison. And it was not something that I led with throughout since 2005, when I joined the movement for social justice. It was not something that was, it was something that was pretty much frowned upon, and with all the stigma and all the shame, I had to walk the halls of Albany. I wasn't telling them that I was formerly incarcerated because I wanted people to hear me and take me seriously. That changed eventually with the new Jim Crow, with Michelle Alexander's book, so on, and it became acceptable to share the trauma of having been incarcerated. So let me tell you a little bit about how I got there. So I'm born and raised in New York City, and I was left in the hospital at Bellevue Hospital. So New York State is officially my mother and father. And let me tell you, they suck as parents. I'm just telling you. And I decided that I was going to literally spend my life rebelling against my parents. And that is what I have been doing. I've been rebelling against my parents just as any normal child has. So of course, I got into a lot of trouble. I've been in group homes. I'm looking at the sister here. So many group homes with the sisters. I know my roots and everything else from the group homes. I wound up going through what was called Spofford Juvenile Detention Center in the Bronx, graduated to Rikers Island, where I opened, as a matter of fact, before Rikers Island was built, I was a child. I was put in C-73, which was all men. I was about maybe 15 years old. It was before the Rose M. Singer Center was built. There was, in the midst of that, I had come back and there was something called the Annex. We used to call it the Wild Wild West, before Rose M. Singer was built. And I was one of the first incarcerated individuals who went into Rose M. Singer. I think it was 1988, if I'm not mistaken. And at that time, I remember walking into these very pink, they made it all pink and quote unquote pretty, but all of it was metal. It was 2 tiers, metal stairs into Rikers Island. I remember as a young child thinking to myself when I walked in there, somebody gonna get hurt. And even in the design of the prison, somebody's gonna get seriously hurt. And I wasn't wrong. Like it happened, and it happened often. I graduated from Rikers Island to Bedford, went through the system, became a juvenile delinquent, youth offender, wound up with Mike Tyson, and he got sent to Tryon. I got sent to another institution called Lansing, New York, in Lansing, New York. So juvenile delinquent, youth offender, then I was labeled a criminal, then I was labeled a career criminal, then I was labeled a danger to society.
Oh my God.
And that's basically the trajectory of my life. I had the privilege of listening to the woman last night who wrote the book, Walls Are Just Walls, is that correct?
Something like that.
Something like that. She talked about the furlough piece being taken out. As an incarcerated individual, it was incredibly important for me to think about the possibility of like, what else is possible? All I knew was this horrible world that I grew up in. I believed that hell is for children at that time. You feel incredibly powerless. And then I wanted to explore something different. The only way that you can explore that in a structured way, when you've never been actually exposed to it, was through the work release program, where I got my first job in my life, and it was at McDonald's, and it took me to a different place. It took me to Rochester, New York. There was a program there. So one of the things I want to backtrack on is the abuses in prison. So as we all know, people are sentenced to time. It is about rehabilitation. They are not sentenced to torture and abuse.
Amen.
And yet that is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
Torture and abuse.
Yeah.
As a young girl, I remember being punched in the face. We were serving beef stew to the other inmates. I worked in the kitchen, had your little hat on, your little gloves, and you're doing this work. And I dipped into the beef stew and I pulled out a dead rat and I said, I am not serving this to these women. And there was a partition with a short hole where you slide the trays through to the women. Well, the women started banging on the walls, give me my food. So this correction officer, I'm like, I'm not serving this. And of course I said it in ways that I wouldn't say it today. I'm not serving this. And he said, get back in line and serve it. Because the women started banging on the windows. They don't see what's happening behind the door. I said, no. The man hauled off, huge man. I might've been 115 pounds soaking wet at that time. called up and hit me in the face so hard that I flew across the kitchen, hit my head on some other thing. They called the other officers and they took me to lock for disobeying, I forgot what it was called, an infraction for disobeying a direct order. I had been threatened in Abion Correctional Facility for getting a sunburn. I asked to that I needed to. I got a sunburn playing. We used to play handball, paddleball in the yard. They told me that they were going to write me up for destroying state property. I was the state property that I was destroying by getting a sunburn in the yard. I'm a light-skinned Puerto Rican. I can't help it. I still get sunburned. So all of these instances, I've seen the sexual abuse. One last story. I had a friend imprisoned. She must have been like 20 years old. And we lived in different, well, two more stories. We lived in different blocks. And I remember waiting for her because she's my friend. So, you know, I was in like J block. She might have been like M block. And so we had to go through what was known as a Sally Port into a cafeteria to eat at Abion Correctional Facility. So I would linger and wait for my friend. She came out one day and she was so sick. You could see the sweat pouring down her. She was like half stumbling. I don't know what was wrong with her. And I'm like, hey, you okay? And she's like, no. My nickname was Rocky, by the way. Rocky, I don't know. Something's wrong. I don't know what's wrong with me. So I half carried, half dragged her to the Sally Port where I said, yo, CO, that's what we used to like to call him. Yo, CO, can I take her to the infirmary? She looked like a little boy. I would just want to preface that. They said, oh, we know what's wrong with her. What she needs is, and then just imagine the sexual connotations that go to that. What she needs is that. No, she cannot go to the infirmary. So we helped her back to the dorm, me and another friend. And the next day I waited for her again. She doesn't come out. I said, hey, is she okay? What's going on? She died last night.
Oh, my God.
She died last night. I said, and what can you do? I never questioned it. When I was in prison, I could never question the injustices that I saw. All I could do is tell my other friends, I told the COs to let me take her to the infirmary. I told them. You just feel that. But what do when you don't know how to organize? You don't know how the system works. All you know is that the system is set up against you and that it's brutal and that they're not going to hear you. And I never questioned it. But today I question everything. Today, I question everything that is unjust. And today, I can tell you that the systems in the prisons, from what I am hearing, observing, and the stories that I am gathering, are brutal. It is brutal, including the stories from all of you. I think it is really incredible. Peter Cook and Jim Ketchum have been, oh my God, unrelenting about what is happening with the chaplains in the prisons. For good reason. It is not often that we get a kind word. I wanted to share with you, this is how I think our agenda should go today. I wanted to ground us in the story of who I am. I came home, I joined the movement, I got the best education ever during this movement. People invested in me. It wasn't the correction system. It was regular, everyday people in organizations that told me, go read this, and I would go read it. Here, let me teach you what this means. Here, let me explain to you the structural and crazy racism that happens in our country, in our state. Here, let me show you the oppressions and how they happened. Let me teach you about the history. And I sucked it all in. Why? Because it took away from me the idea that I was constantly to blame for the conditions that I experienced. And it actually helped me see the bigger picture. And that was so incredibly important. It relieved a lot of my own guilt for things that I had done in life that were against the law. And it put me on a pathway to redemption. So today, what I want to do is tell you a little bit of my story, how we got where we got, how I got where I got. Pass it to Eric to share a little bit more about the End Prison Violence campaign. I really want to hear from all of you, whether now or later, what makes you stick and stay? There have to be some meaningful moments for you as prison chaplains, as chaplains in general, despite all of the pain that you are surrounded with on a continuous basis. Something is making you stick and stay. And I need to understand that, because that gives me motivation to stick and stay when things are so clearly against us. And we've got to find motivation wherever we can. So, moving forward, I obviously grew. I didn't know what a county legislator was. I had only gone to the 6th grade. Instead, I got my degree. I learned from incredible people who have been in the movement for many, many years. And I became the executive director of a statewide political organization, 40-year-old political organization with some serious strength in this state. And so I'm very proud of that. One of the people that I knew in my journey was a man by the name of Robert Ricks. He and I and our family was very, very close. We were close. We went to Narcotics Anonymous rooms together, Alcoholics Anonymous rooms. By the way, I stopped my second chance journey. I stopped doing drugs and alcohol, which I never wasn't much into alcohol, but I stopped doing drugs the day that I came into the movement, and I've never went back. It gave me purpose. It is a purpose-driven life, you know? So, thank you. I do not feel ashamed today in saying this. Before, I remember telling a reporter that I was formerly incarcerated and wanting to run away, and now Jimmy Bell is in the room and I'm okay with it. So that's growth. So Robert Ricks was a good friend of mine. In December of last year, I had our 41st Citizen Action Gala in New York City, big event. And the next day I went to the hospital and was told that I had a tumor the size of a watermelon in my stomach. So I was diagnosed with cancer in December, ovarian cancer. And they told me, you have, the prognosis is you have about a year to live. They told me this in December, and I said, how is that possible? I have a meeting tomorrow. I kid you not. She was like, I think I need to leave you in the room to figure this out. As I was preparing for surgery, my surgery was January 6th. Oh my God, you have no idea how I felt about that. So Robert called me and said, you saw what happened to my son. Obviously, the video had come out in December, I think it was December. It was after December 9th, so around that time, the video came out that showed these officers beating his son to death. I had not reached out to him. A, I was sick, and B, I wanted her family to grieve. And he calls me and literally says, God put it on my spirit. He's a very, very faithful, devout person. Put it on my spirit to call you, Rosemary. I know that if we're going to change the system, you're the person that I know that can fight, that will fight like crazy. And then I said, Robert, I have cancer. I can't do it. I'm going into surgery. He was like, I'm coming. I was like, no, you have enough on your plate. He did wind up coming. And I said, you know what? I'm going to find someone who can walk you through this. I'm going to find someone who understands the systems, because it's this at the state level, and who can really, really help you. And I know that Robert is someone who is incredibly authentic. Someone talked yesterday about wanting to do things at the front end before they go into the prison system. That's the work in life he's dedicated himself to, is really building at the front end. If you think of the criminal justice system, you think of it in 3 buckets. You think of the bucket before they get into the system and what happens during the courtroom, that whole intimidating place that is like sentencing, etc. Then what happens when you sit in prison, right? Are you getting the rehabilitation, the correction, the safety in order to really reflect on your life and decide which path you want to take at the end of the day? And then you have the pathways to release, the getting back out into the world and reintegrating into society in a really good way. So those to me are the 3 buckets. And so Robert has spent his life on the first bucket. Much of the movement has spent their collective life on saying, you know what? It's safer on this side of the wall than on inside. You even heard it last night from the author, right? It's much safer to be outside than it is to be inside. That should be our goal. Many call it abolition. I'll be honest with you, I do not believe I will see abolition in my lifetime. However, I do believe that people need to survive today in order to be able to see liberation tomorrow. And so that is where, after working with Robert, I decided to call Rivera+Schneiderman, my good friend. And I was like, what is Eric doing? He's like really smart attorney, really knows this stuff, was the attorney general, gotta, come on, Eric, meet with Robert Ricks. I'll let him tell you the story of what happened when he met with Robert Ricks. All I have to say is that throughout chemo, this has become something where, as I reflected on all the issues, because I could have been the poster child for just about any social justice issue that is out there. I reflected on the fact that I had not really delved into this particular issue on the ground. I brought criminal justice into citizen action. I did those things, but not on the ground level, not really sharing my story and not getting involved really deeply in changing things for people that we had actually left behind. And so in reflecting on what I want to do with the rest of my life and the magic that has happened a little bit with our group and this process of understanding that there were people who had been working on prison conditions, and I absolutely share that. But there was not enough of a statewide collective that really thought about it. So I'm going to stop there. I think that's enough from me. And I'll let Eric talk. I know we had some time, so I took a little time. Okay? All right.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you today. This has really been kind of a remarkable journey. So Rosemary called me in January and said, my good friend Robert Ricks is grieving, but he wants to be a voice for reform. And can I help him navigate, because he didn't know anything about the machinery of the state government, can I help him navigate the opaque, anti-democratic, and corrupt swamp that is Albany? I was in the state Senate for 12 years. I was the Attorney General for 8 years. So for better or worse, I have a doctorate in Albany. And I spoke to Robert, and in the first call, and I was like, I'm not really champing at the bit to go back into that scene, but in the first conversation, Robert said, and with just palpable sincerity, I truly believe that my son died so that others may live. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go to work for this man. This is just a wonderful, deeply spiritual human being. And, prisoners are being beaten up and abused and denied health care all over the United States. But the videotape of Robert's son, being beaten to death gives us evidence that no other state really has. It's just impossible to deny that we have a problem if you watch that videotape. So, Robert opened up to me about his background and everything else. And at the end of the call, I sort of said, let me tell him something about me. He said, you should know I'm in recovery. And he said, I have 32 years. And it was like, we are all in this spiritual program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that enabled us to communicate at a deep level that created a real bond. So Robert and I went to Albany in February, and he blew everyone away. I mean, I've been in many, many meetings in the state government, and Robert comes into a room with legislators and says, I believe my son died so that others may live. You in this room have the power to see my son did not die in vain. And that gets people's attention. And strong public statements of support from the Senate Majority Leader, the Speaker of the Assembly, the Deputy Secretary to the Governor for Public Safety, Robert on the front page of the Albany Times-Union. And then Rosemary and Robert and I, and Rosemary was on the team. It's just that chemo would knock her out for, 4 or 5 days, but then she'd pop right back up and get back into it. She is a warrior. Actually, at one point, we had to do a Zoom with a funder, and she was in the hospital getting the chemo pumped into her to do the Zoom call. So that's how much of a warrior this woman is. So we realized that while there were people working on changing the parole laws and getting more people out of prison, and there were people working on opposing rollbacks to the bail and discovery reforms, there really was no statewide campaign about conditions inside prisons and to stop the epidemic of violence. So if there had been, we would have just joined up with that campaign, but there wasn't. So we started End Prison Violence. And in the months that followed, people just kept showing up to say, yes, this is important. We want to help. We want to participate. And if you look at our website, endprisonviolence.org, you'll see a whole list of organizations that are now involved in this work. And it's really been an extraordinary experience. So Robert and I went back to Albany in May and unveiled a 9-bill agenda called the Robert Brooks Agenda for Justice. And by the end of the legislative session in June, the legislature passed omnibus prison reform bills, same in both the Assembly and the Senate, that included the provisions of 5 of our 9 bills, plus 5 other reforms. So this was a big deal for the state legislature to finally get a move on some of these things. And I can talk more about what's in the omnibus bill, because that's the current, that's what we're struggling over right now, is trying to get the governor to sign it without amending us to death. So we've continued to build. We have an organizing committee that Rosemary is deeply involved with. We've had press conferences in New York City. We had a big press conference in Rochester, October 21st in Albany. All are welcome to that. That should be a really good one. And we've just continued to build this organization and build this movement. We now have a policy and legislative strategy committee, an organizing committee. We're still kind of working on our fundraising committee because not a lot of people volunteer to be on the fundraising committee. So, but we have raised some money and we need to raise more. And then communications. So we are building this organization for the long haul. I expect this will be a 5 or 6 or 7 year struggle to have really meaningful reform. The reforms in the Omnibus Prison Reform Bill, frankly, are fairly modest. They're good reforms, but they're not going to put an end to the violence. But let me say a little bit about what's in that and where we are right now, because there has been dramatic changes just this week. The way the state government works is that the legislature will not deliver a bill to the governor until the governor says, I'm ready to get the bill, send it to me. When she receives the bill, a 30-day clock starts ticking for her to sign it, veto it, or amend it. The day before yesterday, she asked to receive the bill. So her people obviously were working on this um, beforehand. They have come back with proposed amendments that are really pretty devastating. And this is apparently the way this administration operates. That they come back with very, objectionable amendments, and then the negotiations start, and they put some stuff on the table that they're gonna know that they're gonna back off of in the negotiations. So the Senate, Assembly, and Governor staff are all negotiating now over what the final form of the bill will be. The things that are critical in the bill are extending the statute of limitations, because a lot of prisoners are intimidated out of filing civil claims against docs and correction officers while they're inside. So this proposal would extend the statute of limitations, so they have 3 years after they get out to file claims. This would provide for cameras in all the prisons in New York State, fixed cameras, to end the problem of prison dead zones. This bill would require the Office of Special Investigation, which is this completely opaque branch of docs that is supposed to be the independent investigator of misconduct by correction staff, but it's not independent at all. I mean, the leadership is appointed by the docs commissioner. They report to him. He appointed his little brother. I mean, it's ridiculous to assert that this is independent. They don't publish any of their data. So this bill would require them to publish it to the legislature and the governor. Things like that can really make a difference. So we're working on this now. In the Senate, our champion is Senator Julia Salazar, and we're in very close touch with her and her team, who are excellent. In the Assembly, it's really more controlled by the Speaker, by Carl Hastie, but we are now in this process, as the 30-day clock ticks away, saying, how much of the omnibus prison reform bill can we get? How much can we get? How much can we stop the governor from watering things down? So you mentioned the State Commission on Corrections. The counter proposal from the governor's people is, instead of expanding it to 9 people of all these different backgrounds, oh, you can add 2 people, but they'll be part-time. Apparently, this is the way they negotiate, that they put things on the table they know they're going to back off of. And, it's different than any other governor I've ever worked with, but hey, you gotta deal with what is. So that's really what we're about. And it's been so amazing to have Peter and Jim on board, because, this started with a very spiritual call to action from Robert Ricks. And we think you add moral authority to our efforts that is very, very important. And we know that the governor cares about what you think. So your presence is tremendously important to us. And Rosemary, do you want to say something about the bucket?
Sure.
You already did 3 buckets, but do another 3 buckets.
Yes, gotcha. I'll do the other 3 buckets. So thank you, Eric. I think it's kind of amazing to have a former Attorney General of New York State working with formerly incarcerated people and legal experts and the Corrections Association of New York, et cetera, in a room. And the reality is to have directly impacted voices and people. I think the real deal is having integrity to that, and having integrity to going back to Robert Ricks, who's part of our steering committee, the father of Robert Brooks, of getting Robert Brooks Jr. to participate and to come together. I think those things are incredibly important. So the 3 buckets. So there's 3 buckets that we're thinking of how to move our work forward. The first bucket is accountability, oversight, and transparency. It is a very unpermeable wall right now, right? So we're trying to see through that wall to ensure that we can't change things that we can't measure, that we can't see, that we can't do these things. We have to have some data, we have to have access, we have to have transparency, and we have to have a system accountability that works, not one that works on paper, but that one that actually works. Second, of all the stories that we've collected and all the information that we've garnered, so many parents, particularly mothers, are screaming to the top of their lungs regarding healthcare in corrections. We're a time in this country where healthcare is under attack. In New York State, where healthcare is going to be under attack, premiums are going up, we're already in a shutdown. All of that is very true. And what I'm afraid of is that as we fight, I could probably ask this room, how many of you believe that healthcare is a human right? And I'm sure that not one of you will leave your hand down. I am positive. Well, let me try it. How many of you think healthcare is a human right?
Amen.
Okay, just checking. All right. But when healthcare is under attack in this country, and you're talking about working people, is healthcare a human right for everyone, or is it for everyone except those who are incarcerated? And so instead of investment and an expansion in a system where the aspirin seems to be the overall cure-all, we want to ensure that people are getting the treatment that they need, because honestly, taxpayers wind up paying for it. At the same time, it gives us an ability to work with different constituencies. I'll tell you what, I met with ASME, and they are proposing a bill that right now what happens is that the guards in the evening shifts have to bring the needle to someone who's incarcerated, right? And they have to do something on a tablet or whatever. Well, number one, the correction officer does not want to bring that needle, doesn't want to be anywhere near an incarcerated individual with the needle. Two, the incarcerated individual does not want the correction officer, because there's a lack of trust and a culture that is horrific, to deal with their medications. Ergo, wow, we might have some common ground here. Hello, we might actually be able to move something between people who are formerly incarcerated and those in the correction system where we agree, no, this is not a system that works. The third bucket is really a system around investment and pathways home. So this is the area that I think that I would like to work with the New York State Councils of Churches on. Either in crafting a bill, because I think it's about access. What I have heard the stories, and I don't want to repeat those stories, you know those stories, is the lack of access, the fact that you're not able to do the things that your heart has called you to. I believe you're in these seats because of some calling that you had.
Mhm.
And if you are not given access to complete that calling, I can only imagine how frustrating that must be for each of you. So, and it must be frustrating to those inside who want kind of a little bit of guidance, who want that spiritual connection, who want to be able to talk to their pastor, their rabbi, their imam, whatever faith or religion you are. And I think it's a violation of our Constitution to be honest with you. So I think that's where I'd like to work with New York State Council of Churches, obviously on everything together, but with the idea that we can potentially put something together for the legislature that will ensure access. I think it's incredibly important. So those are the three buckets. One last thing I wanted to tell you in my experience that I think is really important is while I went through prison, I was sitting there thinking about the proliferation that I saw of the carceral system in real time, and did not recognize what it was that I was seeing. When I first went to Bedford Hills, what they call the back buildings now was very new. When I went to Abion Correctional Facility, there were 4 blocks, A, B, C, and D. When I went back, because I was a knucklehead, it was A, B, C, D, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, plus they built these, and I was like, oh, women are just committing more crime. That wasn't the case. Women weren't committing more crime. The laws were obviously wrong. One of them being the Rockefeller drug laws. I was in there with grandmothers who had never seen a drug in their life, didn't know what it was. And I'm like, oh, you were selling drugs? She's like, no, my son had it in his room.
Yeah.
My name is on the lease. I wind up with 20 years.
Uh-huh.
So I'm really grateful to Eric Schneiderman for leading the charge, so those types of things don't happen any longer. But you had entire families, the matriarchs of many families, destroyed and taken away. You said you're in Broome County. I am fascinated and would like to talk to you because what I am hearing about Broome County, it's the only place where you could get mental health services, is to go to jail. Can you imagine? So what do you do with mentally ill people? They're going to wind up in prisons. You don't have any other space for them. So all of this is in these three buckets. We really want to focus on the prison conditions. We won't lead on things that have already been elder parole, that is RAP, the second looked at, very important. We will support those, but we're not leading on them. We're coming in the middle of a movement, and there's challenges in that, right? There's challenges in that. Some people say, well, making prisons pretty and good is going to stop us from closing prisons down. And again, I remind you all, I want people to survive today. After my scare with cancer, I really believe people should be allowed the possibility to be alive, the human right to be alive, the human dignity to be able to choose something else. So what else do we have?
What we have is questions and comments.
Yes, and really, if you could just share with us what really keeps you in these prisons, what makes you do these things, why you became a chaplain in a prison of all places, because I bet you're doing time right along with everyone else. So please share with us.
Yeah, I'd like to say that the reason I became a chaplain, or that I stayed being a chaplain, is I said to people that my chapel, the guys that come to worship on Sunday, that I could see, they are more willing to admit their brokenness than most people in churches on the outside.
Very true.
And because of that, God is able to do a quicker work in their life, doing the work of transformation. And that is incredibly exciting to be a part of as a chaplain.
And is there anything preventing you from doing that incredible work?
Yes, right now, I'm retired, but I'm hearing stories that some worship services are being canceled because they're giving the excuse, oh, we can't staff that. But the law says there's something called RLUIPA, which is a federal law that entitles every inmate to worship in whatever tradition they choose to worship. And yet they're being denied. And also there's probably hundreds of volunteers out there that are being locked out because they can't go in and conduct Bible study because the facility claims that they're understaffed and they can't allow people who have dedicated their lives to being volunteers to facilitate Bible study.
Yeah, when Rosemary mentioned the third bucket of investment programming, they are also preventing education programs, counseling programs, and the excuse is always, we don't have the staff. And they are down in terms of the numbers of correction officers. There are ways to address that. I mean, if they passed elder parole, I mean, I assure you, I'm a senior citizen, but you don't get out of prison at 70 years old and start shooting up the town, right? I mean, it's like, should be a no-brainer, but they have not been open to that yet. But look, it is very much on our agenda to restore the right to worship to incarcerated individuals in the state of New York. And believe me, Peter and Jim are relentless about reminding us of that every time we have any kind of a meeting. Even if that's not the topic of the meeting, they are relentless about it. So, it's on our plate. And, yeah, it's, what's going on right now is just completely unacceptable. And again, I say this is a 5 or 6 or 7 year program, but I think we can get this done. I mean, Rosemary mentioned the effort to repeal the Rockefeller drug laws. We worked for 20 years before we could get to the point where the public understood. You know, I remember speaking to audiences and they didn't know what the Rockefeller drug laws were, but they knew something was wrong with them. And that enabled me in my last term in the state Senate to put a bill on the floor to finally repeal them. And it's not going to take that long for this project.
Can I ask you all a question? I was talking to a pastor by the name of Myra Brown in Rochester, New York. And I was telling her that there's a lot of fear within the faith community, within prisons. And that perhaps they faced retaliation.
Sure.
And I see a lot of heads nodding. And she asked me a curious question. She asked me, what does retaliation look like for chaplains in a prison? And I didn't know how to answer that.
You're being threatened to lose your job. I advocated for my chapel to have some music instruments that were taken away. I called ministerial service in Albany to advocate for that. Next thing I know, my superintendent started the process to get me fired because I had, spoken out to my superiors in Albany.
Is that the same for everyone?
Yeah.
No?
Well, could I just ask, so please, I want people to speak freely. If you would be more comfortable writing down a question and we read it, we can also do that. So just wanted to want people to speak freely and yes, go ahead.
I've had some political backlash, but the one thing that really bothers me is some of the programs we do, like some Christmas programs for families and so forth. I get absolutely chewed up on blogs that are connected with the newspaper and the TV stations. And so this stuff is just horrible. And I decided just not to get into, part of the expression, a pissing match. I don't respond back to it. I just leave it alone. And it's actually comes from some advocacy groups too, have blasted me, thinking that I'm the man, connected with the system. And I'm actually on their side. And but there's just incredible abuse and venom because I'm doing something. I get it from both sides because I'm doing something for inmates, and the other ones I'm not doing enough for them. And there's certain things I can't do, which they don't understand. And things that I am doing, give me a break. And what keeps me going though, you asked that one question. There's a passage in Matthew 25. I was sick and in prison and you visited me. So what we're doing there, we're doing it for Jesus. And that's a driving factor.
Thank you. Thank you.
So,
Yeah, I think that's the other hands. Rafael, I remembered your name.
Oh, well, thank you. I remember yours too. I just have a few, I don't even know where to start. So I'm gonna start here. You mentioned, Eric, that it's impossible to deny what happened to Robert's brother. As if this is what sets this whole thing in motion to bring change. But yet the abuse continue in a pervasive manner.
Yes.
So, that's one thing. 40 years you've been involved, right? Your organization.
Yes.
Do we need to wait 40 more years? I know that you said 5, perhaps, for some of these things to happen. But why can this be treated in a more triage way? People's life should be more important than a second look to someone's track record in the criminal system. See what I'm saying? So in other words, you stop the bleeding first, and then you move to the next thing. Is that possible? I mean, I'm just saying because the legislature, I read it, I saw what's happening, things like that, but yet people, and you know why I say that? Because my son's in prison.
Hmm.
And because he's been abused. You're talking about this thing, you mentioned healthcare. But these things need definition. And I tell you why, or create new terms to redefine them. Because my son has access to the medication that he needs, but you know what? They won't give them to him. You know why? As a form of punishment.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's right.
So these are, so it's healthcare, well, he has what he needs, it's just it's not been given to him because he is being, marked, target.
Can I
and
be
so-
clear on this? I just want to say something. You're bringing up an incredible point that I really believe. We cannot legislate our way to a better culture within prisons. We just can't.
Right.
So we've seen it with solitary confinement. We've seen it with many ways where things are not implemented the way that they should be. We have to be working, and this is why all of you are so incredibly important in changing hearts and minds. When they finally see that treating others with dignity, humanity, and respect also makes them safer. And so I hate this us and them that is happening, when at the end of the day, I think of a prison community, the entire community. There are COs that are very nice people who have good families. I'm sure you've met some, and there are some that are not quite so nice. And I wonder where we find folks like that honestly turn quite evil within the system. So your son, like my son, is also in prison, and we have to do what we can. I can't walk into a prison and talk to COs. I would love to talk to their families, because their family and you as a family member of an incarcerated individual both want their loved ones to come home safe and sound. So there's more common ground than we think. Legislation alone is not going to do it, but legislation will actually bring some transparency. We need to push things that are common sense. I cannot believe that we have to legislate and regulate things like don't hit a prisoner in the arms when he sticks them out of a cell block. Or I cannot believe that we have to legislate don't feed people rats that are in beef stew. Like, these are like common sense things. But without the ability to hold people accountable, we're never going to change things.
But I think, when he's speaking about an anti-lynching bill, Martin Luther King said, law can't make someone love me, but if it can stop him from killing me, that's good too.
Yeah.
So, there are, look, everything is on the table as far as we're concerned. Keep in mind, we really only started organizing around this in March. And the fact that we got an omnibus prison reform bill, that is lightning speed in Albany, where it is very easy to stop things from happening and very hard to make things happen. So we're looking at possible litigation as one avenue. And we're looking at administrative changes inside docks, and we're looking at legislation. But the barrier for the moment is the governor, who is just taking this very common sense set of reforms in the omnibus prison bill and is putting up significant resistance. So we will be on October 21st convening in Albany for a big press conference and, calling on her not to amend this bill to death. And, I've told her people that I would love to have Robert Ricks at a bill signing with her, but it's not going to happen if the bill is no good. So we're doing what we can do to be creative, and we're doing what we can do to create the political pressure to make something happen. It is going to take us a little time. We're just getting started. I mean, it's just in the last 6 weeks, we set up our committees to sort of structure our organization. So this will take a little bit of time, but we've made a lot of progress already, and there is a growing sense of public awareness that there's really something wrong here. And Is anyone here from Onondaga County? No, so Bill Fitzpatrick, who's the district attorney.
Oneida, right in Utica, in the
Oh,
backyard.
Oneida, okay, that's where the trial's going on. Yeah, and, you know, Bill is I've worked with for a long time, very conservative, very like pro-cop guy. And his statements after, you know, interviewing the correction officers and determining to charge them and everything else said, no one can tell me there's not a problem here. This is a problem. And these trials are going to call attention to it. We then have the Messiah Not-Week trials because there's another prisoner who was killed on March 1st. And we're not going away. That's the most important message to give to people in Albany. Because at the state government is people are like, oh, you know, I can wait this out. People are going to be critical, but this will blow over. This is not going to blow over. We are not going away.
Yeah.
And it's great to have you with us on this journey.
Yeah.
I just got a question. So recently I've been hearing that the federal government is kind of getting a little bit involved in the United situation. Is that true or that's just a rumor?
I'm not aware of any action by the federal government on that front. They're messing up a lot of stuff, but they haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, they are.
I know many of you have at times, I remember I used to be on the board of the Greater Rochester Community of Churches, and I did a listening tour to many of our clergy at one time. And I remember some of the responses that I received was they felt like rent-a-callers. I don't know if you,
Oh, sure.
I'm sure many of you
Yeah,
do for these kinds of issues. Right? Like, we call you for this. Can you be the moral authority for that all the time? And I bet it must be really wearing. This is an instance where this is also directly impacting you, and you have stories, personally have stories about what you're facing within the system. So on December 9th is the anniversary of Robert Brooks' death. And I hate to ask, but we are going to need the moral authority to kind of like, whether symbolically or not, we're hoping that we can get an omnibus package, which again is like a very small first step. But can you believe how hard we have to fight for common sense legislation? I can't believe the hours and the time and the effort and the asking people and the prodding to just get common sense legislation passed. Imagine if it was truly transformational. The woman last night, I really got to read that book. Walls Are Just Walls, talked about the need to actually, the changes at the federal level and the changes in our country and the history of corrections a bit. And I think we need to shift the narrative again. She talked about Willie Horton and how Willie Horton actually helped to shift and change the dynamics so that furloughs, conjugal visits, all of that was curtailed. How actually it was seen as, even from very conservative people, how it was seen as a positive, and yet that changed, that whole law and order drive. You see it again with the explosion of ICE within our jails. And you see it when people are dying. Someone died in Long Island. You see that explosion in our jails. You see the reluctance of prisons to take more people from the jails in. And I have to question, I read a report that talked about the ratio between correction officers and the incarcerated. And it seems like New York had the highest ratios of number of correction guards to the incarcerated. So how is it that Mississippi and everywhere else allows people to do this? I had a reverend on 2 Saturdays ago drive 6 hours to see her son and was denied access. The number of people, I believe it's 60, this weekend alone, who were denied access to visit their loved ones has skyrocketed because of the body scanner situation. I hear the yeses. I think we've all been made aware how many people have drove. It's impacting them economically. One woman had 4 children with her. They had to spend the night to try, with no money, to try and see their loved one the next day because they didn't want to drive and they'd already made the arrangements. It's an incredible burden for people who are out here who have a loved one incarcerated. So all of these issues persist, from nutrition to access to the disability folks. I met a young man who was deaf, who said, I was in a prison within a prison, who could not communicate with others. Which is why I asked, is this not a violation of the Disabilities Act?
Yes.
Simply put, so we are violating laws on a consistent basis. We're not implementing things, and we have to shift the narrative. And there is no way I know how to shift that narrative because I on my own. You have a flock. You all do. People listen to you. And on behalf of them, I'm asking you all to have the courage to stand up and think about, I have to ask myself, what am I willing to risk? I'm sure that as you're thinking of, oh my God, these CEOs, they're going to take my job, et cetera, are they going to give me? I think you need to think about what you're willing to risk in this fight too.
And Rosemary is our story collector, and we post on the End Prison Violence website stories. So if any of you are willing to share a story, please talk to Rosemary about it, because the stories are very important. And I think, I've been in New York politics for a very long time. I don't think the governor wants a story that people are being denied their ability to worship. So, we will use every tool in the toolbox, but, there's an old saying, we get from our elected officials what we make them give us. And that is true. And we're all about making them give us a lot more than they have given us, as far as stopping violence in prison, stopping the violence of bad healthcare, denial of healthcare in prisons. And, again, we're not going away.
I am also a story collector for the State Council of Churches. I volunteer my time to sit in on lots of hearings regarding criminal justice reforms of all different sorts. And the most valuable thing I have to talk about is not necessarily the theology, not necessarily the logic, but it's the stories. What happens? What do you see? How are people being hurt? How are you unable to do your jobs? Being able to tell the story without any names, but to tell the story is super, super powerful.
I'd like to just talk
the prison volunteer for a couple of decades. And I left that formally last week because we just aren't getting into the facilities. And when we're eligible to go into the facilities, we can't have contact with parolees. So I left that, and I'm hoping to work in some reentry programs in my community. But when we go into the prison and we help the chaplain with their mission, and we interact with the residents of the facility, it's a really important mission. But really important also is that we bring stories out beyond the walls, and we talk about the conditions and the oppression and what we personally observe and hear. And that isn't happening now.
Oh my God, I'd love to talk to you about that.
Thank you. It is important.
I just want to remind everybody that violence is not just the fists and the hands. Violence is what Raphael talked about. The refusing someone as a punishment, their medical things. The psychological trauma. When I was told that I am a piece of state property and think yourself as a piece of property rather than a human being. Those are psychological traumas that are inflicted. And so we have people going in who are already traumatized, and yet we want them to come home better? Or are they going to even need more help in the end because of the trauma that they've received upon of those traumas?
Yeah.
So,
And this is where Jeremy Travis, who ran John Jay School of Criminal Justice, wrote a book called But They All Come Home. And that's what people seem to just have amazing ability to forget. I mean, there's a tiny number of people who die in prison. The rest of them all come home. And we're having them all come home in worse shape than when they went in. I mean, that's, you know, this is not an anti-crime program.
yeah.
Anybody else?
I do volunteer work. I've been there about a year now, so I'm still pretty new at it. But when you mentioned about the Broome County and mental health, maybe it is better than other places, but it still is very hard for people to get it. I had a woman that's was the victim of domestic abuse, and she and her partner both ended up in jail. But it wasn't until she got it so bad that she ended up in the psych ward in Binghamton that they did get her somebody to have counseling for the first time ever. So, but I'm just thinking also about like those guards. I mean, I couldn't watch that video. It was just too terrifying, but what made them do that? You know, they need some psychological help to do something like that.
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah.
And now we're taking applicants as young as 18,
Yes.
who are well known for their ability to control their anger. Yeah.
The reality is that I think that correction officers, and I talked to a woman who currently works at one of the correction offices and is talking to me exactly like I said, correction officers do time too.
Yes.
Yes.
And many of them, let's be honest with each other, not everyone who is incarcerated is just wanting to reflect at that moment and change their lives, right? Like, not everyone is there on their journey. Hopefully we get them there. So they're also afraid. And then they have nowhere to turn to say that they're afraid when a fight breaks out. They are traumatized.
Yes, they are.
Too.
Yeah.
And I get that because I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen them trying to, I don't know, it's that masculinity thing that comes up and they're puffing up their chest and they don't want to tell their coworkers that honestly, that just scared the living bejesus out of me. They can't do that. So they need mental health and supports too. I really do believe it's a prison community, and what we need to have happen is something where people actually have understand that they are dependent on one another in terms of how they move forward. That is the truth of the matter. So yeah, guards are not, I would call them guards. I think something happens. Do you know how you get a legislator and you have all this faith in this legislator? Like, it's happened to me before. I've like had all this faith in this Albany person. We're gonna get him into office. He's really believes this is his thing. And then all of a sudden they disappoint the crap out of you, right? How many of you experienced that?
Yeah.
We all have, right? And at the end of the day, you know, something happens when you get into those positions. Mostly, think about the people that we're hiring here. They've never wielded power before. A lot of people who don't wield power, all of a sudden you're given the gavel and you have all the power. And guess what? You abuse that power because you've never held that power before. And so they don't know how to do that except by controlling and oppressing other people. So they need to learn.
Now, Rosemary's point is well taken, having been in the state legislature for a long time. It's a matter of culture.
Yeah.
And in the state legislature, the culture is go along and get along, don't rock the boat, be collegial with your colleagues who, have been around for a long time doing nothing, and they want you to do the same thing. In correctional institutions, the culture is one of dehumanization and domination. And, you get in as a new correctional officer, you're trying to fit in with the group. I mean, some of the most astonishing things about the video of Robert Brooks being beaten to death, you just have people standing around. I was like, nurses, watching, not doing anything, not saying anything. And we're looking at new legislation after we get past the omnibus bill with the governor for this coming year. And it's sort of shocking to say this, but we're looking at an anti-torture bill because they don't create liability for medical professionals if they participate in or don't report, violence or any other form of that comes under the definition of torture. So we do have a ways to go, but it's been amazing to me how many people have just stepped up and said, yeah, this is right, I'm going to work with you. I mean, great institutions like the Rivera Institute of Justice, the Prisoner Rights Project at Legal Aid, the Promoter Center for Justice at Cardozo Law School. It's time for this. It is time for this. There's a hunger for this. And do we have a lot of public education to do? Yes. Can we do it? Yes.
But like Rosemary said, that some of these things are so common sense. A doctor, a nurse shouldn't have a new law telling them to preserve a life. They take that oath before they get that certificate. So it's almost like, there's a level of stupidity that you have to be highly intelligent to achieve. I mean, what is this? So I'm just, more laws and more regulation cannot change your heart. Period. However, there are ways to bring accountability. Oh, you stand there, you're fired, you're gone. That's why accountability, in my opinion, it should be, a critical thing to look at. Because if you're gonna lose your job, there's no way that if you suspend it without pay, things like that. I mean, you're gonna think twice because you have a family, you have this, you have that.
So you raise a really important point. There is no functional system of accountability for officers who abuse prisoners. I came across a report. There was a case where a superintendent was sued for failure to supervise correction staff that were abusing prisoners. The head of labor relations of the Department of Corrections, one of their top people, put in a report that said, actually, superintendents and supervisors have no authority to discipline officers. All they can do is write a request to the Office of Special Investigations, which is a total black box. It is completely opaque. They do not publish their records. The Correction Association of New York can't get access to their records. One of the provisions of the omnibus bill would require them to publish their records so we can see what's going on. We have no idea what investigative steps they take. And, then before they send a notice of discipline to a correction officer. And one of I'm kind of obsessed with this as someone who was formerly involved in investigating and prosecuting things. We've got to replace the Office of Special Investigations, and there are different legislative proposals that we're discussing. One is to put their functions in the Office of the State Inspector General, and that Lucy Lang, who's apparently superb. And so, these are steps that we have to take, but we're going to call attention once we get the data, which we'll get after the omnibus bill is signed. I think we're going to be able to demonstrate how useless the Office of Special Investigations is and take steps. So if there is accountability, if you're going to get a notice of discipline, if you're going to get suspended, your point is exactly right. That's that will change conduct, if not hearts.
I had a question, so, so one of our challenges in addition to services of worship, is programming, Bible studies, support groups, volunteers coming in. And it, at best, in the system is uneven. I have heard from some chaplains that that's actually going okay, but that's really the exception. And, I'm just wondering if there's a way when we work on legislation that if you had some thoughts about ways that would make that easier. And then the follow-up again, I just thought your question was intriguing. What for chaplains is, makes it difficult for you to do what you feel called to do? Or if things are going pretty well, that we hear about that too.
Mhm.
Okay?
Yeah, no, that is important. It's really important for us to also educate ourselves on what is working. And there's a huge variation from facility to facility. One of the problems that feeds into the staffing issue is that New York has 42 prisons. I mean, we don't need 42 prisons. I mean, they could consolidate some of them, and that would make things go better. But there is a wide variation sometimes from facility to facility. But if there are stories of things working, we want to hear those too.
Yeah, and Raphael, you're absolutely right. Passing laws doesn't change hearts. You can be as logical as you want. You can be as common sense as you want. But if you can tell a story about what happened, good or bad, that is the first chance we have to change hearts. So please pass those stories on.
One of the nicest things that I experienced when I first became a chaplain, I was serving at Clinton Correctional Facility. And at that place, some 23 years ago, the guards were required to be in the chapel, obviously for security reasons. They stand along the wall but the good news was they got to hear the gospel. They got to hear a message. And one Sunday I preached on, every year when the Martin Luther King holiday came around, I'd always preach a sermon on Dr. King. And after in that jail, it's up on a hill and you have to walk down a hill inside the facility. And as I'm walking down, there's a station, a desk for the corrections officer. He says, "Chaplain, come here." He says to me, and this is a Caucasian person. He says, "Chaplain, when all people can claim Martin Luther King's holiday as their holiday, we will make a great leap forward." And so, praise God, there are COs that are connecting with God's kingdom, in some ways.
Yes.
Yeah, can I say something to that?
Yeah.
I really believe that, when you're in prison for a long time, you have no choice, especially as a woman in prison.
Mm.
You have no choice but to build relationships
Yeah,
with some of
right.
those guards. Like
Yeah.
all of the prisoners wind up building relationships with those guards. I just happen to know which guards, you have to go to the guards for your personal hygienic needs.
Mhm.
Going to man number one is already uncomfortable enough. But you wound up knowing which guards to go to and which guards you really shouldn't go to. And so I love your story, and I ask you to keep your eye out, because there's an us and them situation that happens, the
Yeah.
greens and the blues, right?
Right,
Us
right.
and them. It's like that in the country as we look at
Oh,
the
God.
country as a whole. I'm so tired of divisions. It's making me want to scream when we actually all have much more in common.
Mhm.
So keep your eye out for
correction officers, there are some correction officers who do have a heart,
Right.
who would be willing, could we get one of them to be willing to speak up
Mm.
about what is happening and the pressure they receive from others? So if you know a correction officer who you believe his heart is in the right place, how do we work with that correction officer to then trickle that around a little bit?
And, you know, if the concern you have about being threatened that you'll lose your job, imagine the pressure on the corrections
Oh, yeah,
officers,
yeah.
right? It's just,
Sure.
you know, you'll be shunned, you'll be cut off, you'll,
Right.
you know, and, you know, your car will be broken into. Anyway, yes.
Mhm.
Oh, one thing I'm just gonna say that happened in Rivera+Schneiderman.
Mm.
Cameras. And that's why Rivera+Schneiderman
Yeah.
is so important.
Yes.
Cameras.
Right.
That's that evidence. So now they're, in process of installing cameras everywhere in all prisons. And the COs, they have to wear cameras. Well, where I work, they've been wearing cameras. But it's even more intense now. And so now it's, people watch what they say.
Mhm.
Even if I come, I work at Albion. In the presence of an officer, and that green light is on, I'm careful what I say,
Mhm.
to the officer, even though I have a relationship with all of the officers, good relationships. It's still important because the cameras now tell the story.
Mhm.
So they're, that's a good thing because it protects you and it protects the,
Yes.
incarcerated individuals.
Mhm.
And cameras tell truth. So, yeah.
Thank you. Listen, one of the provisions of the omnibus reform bill would require mass installation of cameras in all of New York's prisons. The governor's counter proposal really gutted that provision. So the Senate and the Assembly are going to be back pushing her to restore the provision to provide more cameras. I don't know how anyone could be against cameras. As you say, cameras just tell the truth. Cameras enable the public to see what our tax dollars are going for, right? And I think the vast majority of people in the state of New York may not really relate to prisoners or may not really understand what goes on in prisons, but they are not in favor of their tax dollars supporting violence and supporting denying the ability to see what's going on. So your point is well taken. They're in negotiations right now. I mean, the Senate and the Assembly and the governor's people are negotiating over the final form of the omnibus bill. And if it's good enough, you know, we'll support it. If it's not good enough, we'll demonstrate against it.
I see one hand and two hands.
My experience, I've worked in all the facilities that what we call Elmira Home, being maximum security places, South Florida, Elmira, 520. I'm at all the correction, according to Chaplain there. I cover Cayuga. We talk about cameras and things like that, like Auburn, we have cameras in that, and of course, Auburn is the oldest prison in America.
Yes, it is.
So we do have cameras there. I wanted to kind of go back to the point that you talked about in terms of our relationship or our role in the facilities as chaplains. You know, it was one of the objectives that we have in terms of being better able to facilitate our purpose there is to build a relationship with security. And so I guess I'm gonna say, there's advocate to say that in my experience working with security, for the most part, is positive. That there are very few that you might call bad apples that are there, but most people there, I see, I've been in Maxis for, the majority of the 18 years that I've been in Docs. Is that they, generally care about them. There are situations that make it very, very difficult because, this is a very toxic environment. The inmates that are coming to our prisons are younger and younger, and they bring a lot of violence with them until they, either have been in and out of enough or been there long enough that they transition from, their affiliations and, begin to think more purposeful about in terms of their time there, making good use of it, I look at prisons as being, or, as a penal system, or it can be rehabilitative, but that's a choice that the person has to make. That either you're going to, while you're doing time, use this time to rehabilitate yourself in whatever the programmings are that are available to you. I have guys who have, for instance, at 5.2 of my guys there who were doing 17 and a half to life. They had no GED. They come from a decent home. Mother was a police lieutenant in New York City. While they were doing time, they got no tickets the whole 17 and a half years in their prison. No tickets, got their GED, went in the Cornell program, got their associate degree at Cornell. They were 2 of 35 guys that were paroled in 2017. 2 of 35 that made parole. One went home to Staten Island, re-enrolled in Fordham University, got his master's degree, and he's running a deputy director of an agency down in New York City. The other one went to Cornell, got his degree at Cornell, and they helped the college professors helped him to get established in Cornell. He ended up getting a full ride to Yale Law School. He graduated from Yale last year, so he's involved in prison. So it's possible. I mean, it's amazing for those of you who understand how the prisons work, for an inmate to be there that long and not get one ticket.
Yeah.
Right. Not one ticket.
That's amazing.
Or to make parole the first hit. So, and I'm not saying that everybody has the same experience. Obviously, there's a lot of things that go on, but I know that a lot of times, a lot of things that go on in prison, is either misinterpreted or it gets a bad rap when there are actually people there. Because in that prison, the officers applauded them when they walked out of the prison. I escorted both of them out of the prison. My death was involved in that, out of prison. I was one of the first ones that was informed that they were getting paroles. So a lot of times it's relational. Sometimes, there could be good experiences and then there are bad experiences too. But I think that in terms of us being chaplains, one of the roles that we have is to try to be that bridge between security and administration and the inmates and the families that are there. And so, and it's not always an easy job, but we have to try to make it, do the best that we can do with the resources that we do have available to us. And so, so that there can be positive outcomes, like in the case of those two brothers that was doing time for 17 and a half life.
Thank you for being a bridge. Thank you for being that bridge and doing that work. I think it's incredible work. What strikes me is that there were 2 individuals, both had apparently some potential, came from some good homes, etc. Most of us who wind up in the prison system do not have that, and many of us don't. And so there is a part of me that says, I'd like to see 2 expanded to all 35 who were in the program, and not just 2 who become the exception, but make it the rule.
But 2 that I'm talking about
Yeah.
did not have good background.
Oh, okay. I apologize. Right.
So, I'm saying that it was a choice. And all of those men, a lot of them may not have made parole that time. Ultimately, some of them did, or maybe all of them did for all that matter.
I want to hear more stories like
So I'm
that.
just saying that
Yes.
that it can be.
It is possible. It is possible. It is absolutely possible. Me going through the women's prison, through Evian Correctional Facility, etc. There were times when I thought I didn't get arrested, I got rescued. I've thought that, many of us have. And you're right, it does take, but it took investment of others in my development in order to get there. It took not living in conditions that were actually inhumane. And yet in some prisons, actually, Jimmy, this will be interesting to you. I've got a Republican mayor, a former mayor, Republican woman, from Hudson Falls, New York. She was a Republican mayor in Hudson Falls. her godson, and she's told me I can share the story, so I'm gonna say the names. Her godson, Mario, is doing 87 years. He's never coming home, she said. But he and a few others started a hunger strike a few weeks ago. Not because they were asking for things that, pie in the sky type things. They wanted this was in, I believe it was Upstate Correctional Facility. They started a hunger strike, Mid-State, was it Mid-State? Okay. They started a hunger strike. I received this letter from this woman who was a former mayor, also Republican, who gave me chills when she said, I actually don't think my godson should ever come home. He has a hairpin trigger, I think she called it. But if they're going to treat him this way, and if the conditions in the kind of rooms and what I'm hearing on the phone as guards are beating the other strikers, for hunger strikers, is happening, and I'm telling people the name of the officer and no one is listening to me. She's saying they're only asking for what the conditions by law that they're supposed to have. And no one knew about the hunger strike. I had to call Salazar's office and say, is this a hoax? Like, this sounds crazy to me. This whole letter sounds insane to me. I don't even believe it, and I've been in prison. I don't believe it. And it was confirmed by Salazar's office that it was happening. So while I'm very glad those kinds of experiences you're having gives me hope that we could have a carceral system with respect that gives people an opportunity and that lets people, but I need it to be everywhere, systemically everywhere, that people get that opportunity, that we have chaplains like you that are becoming bridges, that we have correction officers that are actually listening. And yes, do our younger people, is the population getting younger? Absolutely, in the prisons.
I'm just advocating
Yeah.
that it does happen in every prison. It is more common than perhaps what you think. So it's not all negative. So I just felt that, everyone's testimony, my experience in the Elmira Republic.
And then I have to go back to the father of Robert Brooks. I have to go back to Robert Ricks and try to explain to him that it is more common than not when 3 months later, another gentleman died, where Robert Ricks called me the night before on, when was it, Sunday night, really late at night, struggling to figure out how does he even go to the courtroom in Oneida County, because he didn't want to go, because he has to relive the trauma, because they had such hope for his son. He's a good man. This man was building a restaurant, had to wind up closing the restaurant for his son down. Like, everything was like, Dad, I'm coming home. He had 1.5 years left to his sentence. And then as I'm thinking about this, and as I think of the instances where the system does break down, we need to strengthen those places. We also need to uplift places where things are working and where programs are working. And we need to learn from that and actually spread that love around. I think that this is a work of love. And thank you for doing that work, rooted in love. It's not the guards are right, the inmates are bad. It's not the inmates are right, the guards are bad. It's you throw these folks into a pot and things are going to pop like popcorn. And we need to figure out ways in order to keep that humanity and that dignity for everyone at its core. I think you had one more.
Yeah,
I'll just ask Peter what.
One of the concerns I have is how do we create a situation whereby chaplains can give more assistance to incarcerated individuals who are leaving. In other systems, we have.
It's a great question.
You have connection with a man and his family. You can help him get a job. You can help him to find a place to live. You can't do that in New York State.
Right.
And that's a very unfortunate thing. Because sometimes people who knows us and what we do and who are willing to support what we are asking for will help. But we can't do that. We can't speak to these people. We can't reach to them. Even though they have been with us in custody for 10 years, 5 years. we can't do a thing when they are leading.
It's against the law.
It's against the law.
That's
It
right.
is, yeah.
Yeah.
One of my facilitator who went out recently, like 4 years ago. That guy did a great, I watched him come from there to there in growth. But when he was going out, I think the volunteers who knew him inside the facility can help him to get a job. They can't talk with him because they are coming in, they can't touch him. So that is part of the thing I think we should look at, because this is the most foolish thing I have seen anywhere in the world, and I've read and studied and seen. Only in New York State I see this.
Yeah, I am not familiar with that law, but.
Oh, yes, there's a variance for the coaching program, but that's it. That's it.
Could I try put a little context around what you said, and our chaplain friends here might be able to. So what happened was that after Dannemora, things started to get much more restrictive in prisons because there was worry about people on the inside having connection with the outside. And so chaplains within the system are really schooled to just work in the inside and to not have a pastoral relationship with somebody once they get in. And that was done a lot for security reasons. But it really makes chaplains scratch their heads a little bit when you're trying to look at the rehabilitative process for somebody that just doesn't stop once they leave the prison doors. So it's a struggle because, you know, in some countries, they don't have that kind of restriction, you know, with that we do here in New York State. It might actually be somewhat uneven in other states even, but I am curious to know, I see Ron's hand, if you might shed a little light on that. So
In order for us to have contact with an inmate on the outside, you know, well, obviously, we got spouse upon that, there's a process that we have to go through in terms of getting permission. If, for instance, that person was within our geographical area, where we live in. The danger, of course, is for, you know, in terms of having someone who works in docks, having a relationship with someone outside of dock, is for them to be compromised. I teach rehab for docs, so that has to do with, you know, telling the staff, warning staff about all the dangers and things like that. That might put that person, that might compromise that person for obvious reasons. You know, much of the illustrations and the case studies that we use, you know, or all of them for that matter, are examples of people who were compromised in one way or another, whether they're a staff person or they're corrections officers and things like that. That's not to say that it will happen in every case, but I even encourage, you know, the inmates who I know live in my area, you know, to reestablish themselves, you know, to encourage them to get reestablished with their families, in their community. I can refer them to resources outside that I know where they might be able to get help. But because I'm still directly involved in the system, then it's not to, you know, it's to my advantage and to their betterment, especially if they're on parole, that they reestablish themselves, get reestablished on the outside. You know, like I said, I can refer them to whatever resources that I know of that may be in that community to assist them, but that's to their betterment as well as to mine too.
Yeah, I would love to see what this statute is that imposes this requirement, because
It's a personnel policy.
it's a directive, I don't.
it's a directive. It's a directive from the docks commissioner?
Yes.
Okay, let me, if you could share that with me, I'd appreciate it.
All right.
One of the things, one of the grants I've been working on repeatedly is to find a way to connect congregations with returning citizens. We know several of them around the state that are doing a great job of doing that, and we know some that would consider it, but they don't know where to begin.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is put together a program where the folks that are doing this work in local congregations can help train new congregations to add to that population where people can be welcomed into a transformative community as soon as they return. It can make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
That's super important. That's super important. And I didn't mention this before, but obviously where we are right now is the message is Governor Hochul signed the omnibus reform bill without watering it down. Don't sign it without significant changes to the bill language. If any of you have any contacts with members of the legislature, and on our website, do we have an action?
Not yet.
Not yet. We're building, we're still, again, we're just very new. So there will be an action provision on our End Prison Violence website. But if any of you have any contact with members of the legislature, the message is, we're calling on the governor to sign the omnibus reform bill without significant changes to the bill language. And then we're already talking about things we want to put on the table for the 2026 legislative session. And this has been really, really helpful. And thank you for all of your good work. Thank you for the great work you do all the time to help people in need, because it is not just physical needs that we need to address. There's spiritual needs too.
Yeah.
And we understand that, in AA, we're very big about turning things over to our higher power. So, and boy, is that liberating when I can turn things over and say, I'm not in charge here. Wow. Then I can exhale.
Being in charge works so well for you, right?
No.
Thank you both.
Thank
Thank you.
So much.
Relationships are incredibly important, so I really want to look at this. This is how I found Jaleel Muntaqim. He's a gentleman who did 50 years in prison. He was an original Black Panther. I went to visit, oh yeah, sure.
So just in terms of like what you bring up and the relationships that you build and how you watch people grow, I wound up visiting Jaleel Muntaqim. He did 50 years in prison, actually 49 and a half. I just rounded up to 50 years in prison. He was an original Black Panther. I went and I met a man who was absolutely brilliant in prison for all those years. And I hired him when he came home. He was 70 years old. He'd never really done much with computers, etc. And I am really glad that I did that, because I don't think he would have really found a place to land after 50 years in prison. Number one, he's been great. Number two, if you think about it, he went anyway, he was maybe 20. He's 70 something years old now. What does he live on in terms of Social Security? Think about the economic plight of people. Social Security takes your last 35 years, and that's how you have a dignified retirement. This guy's still working at Citizen Action. I don't think he's going to be able to stop. But there are economic angles around all of this as the world is looking at affordability. Think about affordability for everyone. But I just want to say thank you, and I could talk about this stuff forever. It's really where my heart is, and I want to thank you all.
Thank you.
If you're interested in getting congregations involved, Harold Dean Trulier at Howard University Seminary. He has Communities That Care. It was the Andy A. Casey Foundation grant. There's good resources online, tremendous guy. I had worked with him. We've led a couple conferences. I have my dissertation on ProQuest on this very same topic. It's called Putting the Pieces Back Together. And we have a program at Broome County We have nearly 48 congregations involved with reentry. And if you're interested in picking my brain on that, I would like to talk with you. Okay, Jim?
Just wanted to close with one quick story before we go to our break. Talking about bridges between incarcerated individuals and chaplains. Good friend of mine, Nancy Hastings Sehested, is a fellow American Baptist pastor. One of the best preachers I have ever heard. And she ended her career working for a number of years in state prisons in North Carolina. And her nickname was Chap, as some of you have probably been called too. And one day, a new prisoner arrived, and she went to introduce herself to him and asked him if his name was Joseph. She said, Joseph, why don't you come by to chapel service? I'll be preaching. And Joseph looked at her and said, you can't preach. It's in the Bible. And Nancy said, really? Is my name in there? But he was serious. Women can't preach, he said. It's in the Bible. And he ignored her for weeks afterwards. But she often saw him with the Bible in his hands. And finally, he showed up one morning unannounced at worship service. And she said, Joseph, welcome. He says, yeah, I've been studying this a lot, especially numbers. And she said, numbers? Yeah, I figure if God can get a sermon out of Balaam's ass, maybe he can get one out of you. So keep up the good work, guys, wherever those sermons are coming from. Thank you very much. We'll be having lunch at 11:30, so we have a few minutes free time. Rosemary and Eric, you're going to stick around?